You're listening to the Back Home Network, presented by Homefield Apparel.
Right up Meridian, baby.
Welcome to the Right Up Meridian podcast here on the Back Home Network. I'm Zion Brown. And joining me today to talk about a little bit of Pacers, but mainly the Fever in the playoffs is none other than Tony East. Tony, how's it going?
Great, man. You were like the only person I ever used to talk about the Fever with. So it's like back to good old days. Good old days here for me.
I know it's been a minute. Tony, if you don't know, guys, covers the Pacers for Forbes and the Locked On Pacers podcast, which is available daily, and then also covering the Fever for it's the IX now, correct?
Yes, the rebrand.
The 9, is it pronounced the 9 or the IX? I guess I haven't.
Yeah,
it's
seen 9. I don't correct people there, but yes, it's the 9. Title 9 and the 9.
Formerly the next. Right, exactly. But yeah, Tony, we'll start with some Pacers talk here. As always, by the way, go to homefield.com. All of our Back Home Network podcasts are presented by Homefield. Homefield 23 for 15% off. Of course, we're in the midst of college football season, and they've got all the great college stuff. I saw they just had a new wave of USF stuff, of USF material after they beat Florida last week. They got a big game coming up against Miami. So I doubt there's much crossover between Fever Pacers fans and USF fans, but I guess if you are, go check that out over at Homefield. But Tony, where I wanted to start with you is going back to the Pacers season. Just a few weeks ago in the middle of August, you published this really, I don't know if I reached out to you, but it's a really great story on the Basketball Feelings Substack. It is called Exits, How Do You Remember? It was just talking about the wild Pacers season and playoff run we experienced. I just starting off with you, how did you come up with the idea to publish that story?
So Katie Heindel publishes Basketball Feelings, and nobody writes like Katie Heindel. Like, I see her at Summer League every year, and she writes a story about her Summer League experience. And I'm like, how did you do that? Like, we did a lot of the same things, and I don't even know how you put these words together and like captured the feeling of everybody being in this hot desert watching these meaningless games. And so she does a series every year after every team gets eliminated, having sometimes her, sometimes someone else write about a specific team. And the Pacers were second to last because they made the finals. She asked me if I would do it. And I was really excited about it because one, you probably feel the same way, like very rarely get to write in first person. So I was really excited about a chance to kind of do that and touch on the emotions of the Pacers season, because a lot of every question I got after they got eliminated was like, oh my gosh, were you at game 7? Or like, were you at these finals games? I was like, yes. Like, it's my job. I was there. But like everybody remembered game 7. I want to know what it was like to see that moment after a full season. It's like, I get why you're asking me that. I get why that's the big intrigue for the Pacers, but it was so much more about that team and that season and that moment that like really captured the essence of the Pacers and who they are and how emotionally they were able to be way better than the sum of a 50-win product. And I really wanted to be able to, like, a little bit of first-person perspective, like show everybody what that was and how that was possible. And it was really fun to put together. And I'm glad people liked it, because there's so many things that made that group special, and they're not going to be remembered for any of those. And I guess I understand that. That's how sports are. But I had a good time trying to convince everybody to go a different way.
Right. And there's so many great details in that story, right? I like the details about just the music selection of all the individual players, whether that be in the locker room or the pregame, where they, like you said, for certain games got to come out and choose what song they came out to, which I think, honestly, the first time I remember seeing that was at the Fever's first game last year in 2024. I don't know if you remember that, or you might have still been on the road with the Pacers during that postseason run back then. But I remember seeing that for the Fever during the 2024 season, and the way they got to do that as their intros to the court before the game. And then I also love the detail just about every player's individual, what they do right before the tip-off. Of course, on TV, they pretty much always show the Halliburton, grabbing up at the bottom of the net on his tippy toe. So we see that one, but from TV's perspective, you don't see, I think you could describe Neesmith, running up and down the sidelines and all the individual handshakes TJ McConnell has. So the details of that is something that obviously a lot different. Like you said, getting to write in first person is something we don't get to do a lot, but the details of that make it a great piece, truly.
That's what I like. That's what makes this team stand out. There's all those little things that are like, the Fever did it once for opening night, right? Here's what makes these players who they are. And then they never do it again, right? And Wonderwall is not Andrew Nemhardt's song, but I'll forever associate it with him now, like Many Men being Halliburton's, and then he gets most overrated. And then they pivoted to Rick, which made me die laughing after Halliburton got his own song. Like, that's all the stuff that made this season fun to me, especially like in the morass of 41 home regular season games. Any unique changing thing is fun. And I've never gotten to ask Ty about what he's thinking about when he grabs the net. I probably should have, but like those little things are what makes especially star players separated and different. And those moments were great.
So yeah, if you haven't read that story, go check it out on the Basketball Feelings Substack. I'll try to maybe even link it here in our description as well. Moving on to one more Pacers topic. I want to talk about the coaching turnover because me and Scott, we came back 2 weeks ago revitalizing Right Up Meridian, but we had just talked about so much about the team and the run as a whole and the Miles Turner departure and all that we did not touch on the kind of awkward, the random Mike Weinar departure from the franchise, right? The mutually parting ways as an assistant coach. I guess for those who don't know, Tony, what was Mike Weiner's role? He's been with Rick Carlisle since I believe 2008. What was his role in kind of developing this team and helping along the way on the staff?
Yeah, he's terrifically talented. There's a reason Rick kept him for almost 2 decades, which in the NBA is like unheard of and ridiculous. He's such a sharp offensive guy. Like all the time you'd hear Rick talk about some offensive set he designed or something. And every Pacers coach, Rick really changed this like a couple years ago. It wasn't as traditional as like the coordinator type you'll see with other teams. So while I would say Mike was more focused on offense, he did some player development stuff with certain guys and was involved in some aspects of defense. And they rotated as the scout, which is typical, but he's really sharp. It did come out of left field for me as well. Like I did not see it coming, and I don't know why. If anyone asks, I still don't know why that happened. He was like in talks with the Knicks right before that, according to reporting, and then pulled himself out, and then he's not with the Pacers anymore. Like that is a loss. That is a real loss. Carlisle's always said that, of course, I think he's a great coach, but he got his extension 2 years ago, and he's like, I really hope the rest of my staff also gets a contract extension at that time, right? Because he really believes in the work that they do to help him and support the team is just as valuable as the things he does. And Mike's been with him for a long time because of those things. So we'll see what Johnny Carpenter can bring. Clearly they have a connection to him. He's worked with the Pacers in limited capacities before. Obviously Jenny and Lloyd and Jim played a big role in what they did last year, but it's a loss and a big shift that they'll have to figure out what they're going to do and how they reassign resources. And we'll see if we ever find out more about it. But again, it's like Miles Turner's a player and players are the product, but a huge loss of their two this summer is going to be Mike Weinar.
Right, exactly. And that's what just made it so odd to me is that as of right now, we don't have any details. You mentioned the fact that he was in talks with the Knicks. And so it'd be one thing if he had just left for the Knicks. That happens, right? He's higher up. He could potentially be higher up on Mike Brown's staff, and maybe that leads to him maybe becoming a head coach one day himself. But that's not what happened, right? He was in talks with the Knicks, shut down those talks himself, and then what was it, like a week or two later, all of a sudden, he's just no longer with the Pacers. So it was definitely a strange situation that I think has been glossed over just because I think there was some Pacers fatigue for like the non-hardcore fans. It was like, okay, we just watched this team go literally to the final day of the season, right? And so after Miles Turner left, also it was just like a lot of people probably weren't even paying attention to that news, but it was just so odd to see the way that broke and the turnover there. And I don't know how that may affect the team. It's hard. That's the thing about assistant coaching change is that even as much as you're with the team, every day and whatnot, and you're covering the team, but even somebody who's just not in that locker room, we never quite know which assistants are fully responsible for what parts of the team. And we won't really be able to maybe see that effect until the season actually begins here.
We will miss Mike picking a kid out to help Obi dunk before every game too. That was always a highlight of game day for me. He was involved in that process ever so often. And he's just a fun dude, man. I really liked getting to know him. So personally that stinks as well. But yeah, any change in staff is an adjustment and any adjustment might cause some disruption to the process. Hopefully for the Pacers, of course, they'll say, yeah, no problem. They have a largely similar staff, but we'll see if it's actually a significant impact when the season gets going, because it does require changes. And again, he and Rick have worked together for so long. You and I were both very young when they started working together. So we'll see what that. Right. So we'll see what that actually ends up looking like for the team this year. But like Johnny could be great, right? We never know with this stuff, and we'll see if any more details come out. But mutually parting ways was also interesting phrasing to the point that I'm curious to see if we ever find out more.
Right. And then also the thing with this is with the Pacers this season, we probably won't even be able to tell, what is like, oh, the offense is worse because Mike Weiner's not there, or the offense is worse because Tyrese Halliburton isn't playing, right? It'll probably be a little bit of both, but we won't be able to really like have a full, evaluation of it, because obviously the best player on the team will not be there for this 25-26 season. But we'll move on and talk Fever now. And the season just ended for the WNBA. We're recording this on Friday, the last day of the regular season was Thursday, and the Fever making back-to-back playoff appearances now. They went 24-20 and made the 6th seed, where they'll play the Dream. We'll preview the Dream specifically in a moment here. But first, I just want to ask you what it's been like covering this hectic Fever season with all these injuries. 18 different players have suited up in a game for the Fever this year. Just what's it been like from your perspective with all the bodies coming in and out of the organization?
Crazy. Like, you want to, I'm not tasked with writing like a super often amount about the Fever, right? A couple times a week. And, you want to do like, I want to write about this person or this trend or this thing. And it's just like, okay, I'm writing about this new player and then this new player and then this player's hurt. How's that going to change things? It's like, I'm doing the same version, replacing the names, and here it goes. It's like, what? Like, that's the same story again and again, but that's what it's been. You're chasing your tail. Okay. I mean, you can take it back. Really, it's been the last like 1 month of time when it's been Sydney Colson, Ari McDonald, Caitlin ankle thing, Chloe Bibby. All those players got hurt in the last month. Sophie Cunningham, right? All that's in the last month of the season, but it's all year, right? Sophie's hurt to start the year. Kelsey's got Caitlin's hurt. Caitlin's not hurt. Caitlin's hurt. Like, it's the whole season. It's been a topic or part of the story of their team. It's just how start, stop. It's been even 2 games without their head coach, right? So it's been really strange to cover because I can't remember, 9, 10 starting lineups is a lot in a 44-game season. And a lot of teams were banged up as it went up to 44 games with no more time in the season. It's just been like they're trying to solve what their identity is, and then they have to change it again. And again, coaching staff as a result, right? I have no idea what they were hoping to do for any significant amount of time. And I think they've done a pretty good job, honestly, getting players who weren't on team kind of good, structure for future seasons. But it made covering this season quite challenging because there was never any rhythm to be like, oh, this is a pattern, or oh, this is disrupting their normal pattern, or oh, this is their peak or their valley. Like, I just never knew. And I still don't even know if they really know. So maybe they'll look awesome in the playoffs. They closed the season really well. They played okay against Atlanta this season, but that was really early. Caitlin was playing. So it's just so bizarre and really hard to get a feel for what a team is and what stands out as different compared to normal.
Right. And it kind of unfortunately got to a point with this team where you could no longer look at the players they were bringing in and say, okay, this is the way they want to play. They were just bringing in bodies at this point, right? And they've gotten to that point where they're just bringing in bodies, right? And like a player like Ariel Powers, who is talented and obviously has a lot of experience in the WNBA. I don't think she was like the first on the Fever's list of players they may have wanted to acquire mid-season, right? Like somebody like that. And so it's just been very, very odd just trying to track this team. And like you said, trying to find any trends or anything like that.
Totally. And especially when like the whole off season they acquire shooting, defense, and leadership was like every player they acquired had multiple of those qualities, right? It was very clear how they wanted to form their team around Caitlin Clark. Guess what? They had Caitlin for 13 games, right? So already you don't get the gist of the identity they tried to build. And so they have to build an identity with a different team. And then that team is a different point guard every 3 games. And one of them was on a different team earlier this season. One of them was on no teams this season, right? And so Ariel Powers has played well, but like I would not consider her like a premier shooter. She's a good defender. She's playing really well for them, right? And it's just how they've had to go about it, that if you are ready to play and you are good, great, you're on the team, even if it's not necessarily the fit that they thought they'd have. And that's maybe where the pattern has been the strongest, is that you've seen them be able to get players up to speed quickly. That's good. That's a good sign of coaching. It's not something you want to be doing 7 times, 8 times in the season of 44 games.
Right. And there's been a lot of chatter, I would say, around Stephanie White in her first year back as the head coach. And it's just, for me, I talked about this on the episode. I went solo last week, and I was just like, hey, she's on track. At the time, she was on track to get the team back in the playoffs. Obviously, since then they've clinched. And she's doing what she can with these makeshift pieces, right? She's not coaching the team. She kind of came over from Connecticut to try to coach. I guess from your perspective, what would your assessment be of the job White has done throughout this 2025 season?
You know what's funny is I think the best answer to that question is the cop-out answer. I have no idea. Like right? Because she had a different team so much that I have no idea what I have a general guess from what the players they signed is, like how they hoped to play and how they hoped this season would look. But because it's been so start-stop the whole time with I can't evaluate her. It's not fair to her to say that they didn't meet expectations. It's so obvious why they didn't win as many games as some people thought they could, although they're not that far behind the range I thought they'd be in, which honestly maybe is impressive. I had them in like the high 20s range, and they're in the mid 20s, and like half their team missed so much time. Like that's a good thing. And so I think that we've seen that her ability to create a system or a style that fits the team that she does have is there, right? That I will give her credit for. But I have no idea how to say anything about her development skills, what this team was compared to what it was supposed to be. Anything I have thoughts on her is based on what she's done before with other teams. And I do think she's a great coach, as she's shown with the Fever before and the Sun. So I don't really have any changes in my opinion of her from what I thought when the Fever grabbed her last summer, because it's so hard for me to have any real conviction take on how well she's done or how poorly she's done, because it's been a different team every 3, 4, 5 games all season.
Right, exactly. It's just been hard to really give her a true grade on what has happened this year with the Fever. I guess one last thing, just in the regular season, obviously there's still a playoffs to be played, so maybe this changes. But what, if anything, do you think this team can take away from what they've seen on the court this year? And as far as maybe changing the roster for next season or just trying to change the way they play from next year, what do you think they can just take away from what they've seen this season?
Question, it's kind of challenging because of how much they've had in and out, but I think they've learned a lot about the interactions that can be had with Aaliyah Boston. I think that'd be my top thing, is that she was definitely one of the best 10 players in the league this year. And she did it for a full season. Like last year, she was very good. Obviously, she was an all-star, but she started really slow, and it took her time to adjust to playing way faster with Caitlin compared to the role she expected in the league and what she had her first season. And now this year, she was involved more and responded well to it. She got a ton of patience in the lane. She could really finish. But so often when they were in a tight game, when they really needed a bucket, whatever, they would just be like, yep, Aaliyah Boston, fulcrum in the 2-man game with Kelsey Mitchell or Odyssey Sims or whoever. And that's not really, it's not that she wasn't doing that. It's just that she wasn't that level of fulcrum before. And they had to do that when Caitlin was hurt so much. I think Caitlin will obviously have the ball in crunch time when she's back next year. But I think they learned a lot about, most importantly going forward, the best ways Aaliyah Boston can be really threatening on offense, and things will become easier for Aaliyah if Caitlin is healthy for more times. And then obviously that Kelsey Mitchell continues to get better. And that's why they won 24 games. Even with all these injuries, they're 2 all-stars. Well, they're 2 healthy all-stars, played all 44, right? And that was huge for them. And I think they learned a lot about what those 2 players can do, how they can interact with the rest of the team, and in a way that will be helpful going forward, because the reason those are important players, who the heck knows who's going to be on any team in the W after this year? Everybody's a free agent. There's a new CBA. No one has any idea. And so the fact that a player that is core eligible in Kelsey Mitchell and a player that is still under contract beyond this year in Aaliyah Boston both had stuff learned about them and played well enough to give you a solid floor as a team, even if Caitlin plays 13 out of 44 games. I think they have to feel good about that. And that would be what I would take away from the most is the Fever is, I know they tried to build around Caitlin and they should still do that, but they can also find players that fit around the Kelsey Aaliyah settings for 5 to 10 minutes a game and feel comfortable that that'll give them a solid floor for the 5 minutes that Caitlin's not playing in a game going forward.
Yeah, and to your point about the CBA, we're not 100% sure that a full season will happen in 2026.
Right,
that's
right.
another thing for another day, right? We're months away from really figuring that out and figuring out the details there on exactly what could be holding the CBA back, but that's its own thing. But you're right about just all the free agents that'll be coming this offseason because of those CBA holdbacks. But yeah, I was really impressed, right, with the way they were able to use Aaliyah Boston, in the high post as a facilitator in a lot of those games once all the point guards started to go down. And I'd seen her do it a bit at South Carolina, maybe not to this extent. And South Carolina, for as good as they were in those years with Aaliyah Boston, they never really had the spacing of a WNBA team where they just had multiple players you really feared from beyond the arc. So I feel like the fact that she was able to do this, at the pro level with better spacing was impressive. And then, yeah, they had to change. You talked about it, the 2-man game, the 2-player game with Kelsey Mitchell and Aaliyah Boston, where last year, a lot of the times, or especially that second half of the season when Aaliyah and Caitlin really got comfortable together, it was a middle pick and roll, right, with all the other three players spread across the arc. This year, Kelsey Mitchell's not that same facilitator, not as tall as Caitlin Clark, so you're not really going to give her the ball in the middle of the court for a pick and roll. It was those side, those corners, clear outs where it was just her and Aaliyah Boston, that two-player game, those dribble handoffs. And they really were able to work that well. I texted you a few weeks ago. I can't remember which game this was, but I was just like, man, if I was a guard in the corner trying to keep up with Kelsey Mitchell as she either actually takes the dribble handoff or cuts towards the basket, I would be terrified because she's so quick that you're making a bad decision either way. So it was really nice.
You know what's funny is like there were so many of those that Kelsey would come around the Aaliyah screen and then wouldn't even look. She would just see that both defenders tried to stay with her because she's so fast and just lobbed it up into the paint and was like, yeah, Aaliyah's got this. I don't know where it's going to land, but she's got the ball. Like, because she's so fast, you have to make sure somebody's shading her. She's just getting a free run right to the rim, right? So, yeah, it's crazy how fast she is and how much that helps Aaliyah too. If those of you don't know, Zion and I sat next to each other covering the Fever when they won 5 games, and Kelsey Mitchell was doing everything by herself. So he has a more appreciation for Kelsey Mitchell than most do. Good times.
Right, for sure. By the way, she suffered her first injury in her career, basically in her life that year, because of how much she was trying to do to help the team, right? She had not missed a game.
On crutches, which is like a rare thing. Yeah.
That was the 5th season of her career back in 2022. She had not missed a game yet and missed, I think, the last 5 or 6 of that season just because of how kind of overworked she was with no real second scoring options. Yeah, that was 3 years ago to see how it's progressed from then to now and how much Kelsey Mitchell is finally getting the appreciation she deserves as well. Yeah. It's been nice. By the way, today she was voted WNBA first team of the AP ballot, not the same as the official WNBA ballot, but I don't know what you think. I think she'll probably be first team on both.
I was going to say, I would suspect, I think the top 3 is obvious. I would personally have Alicia Gray 4th and then Kelsey Mitchell 5th, and it's positionless. So great. That's top 5 MVP. That's my first team LW. I understand some other players that could maybe knock her to second team. I would not agree with that, but yeah, she's going to make an LW team. And I think first is very possible, as the AP showed.
There we go. And that makes a great transition. You've mentioned Alicia Gray with this upcoming matchup that the Fever have in this best of 3 first round against the Atlanta Dream. I'll first start by asking you, because it came down to last night whether they would play Atlanta or Vegas. I would assume you believe this is a better matchup for the Fever than having to play the Red Hot Aces right now.
Yes, I do. And it's not even because I think the Dream are like way easier, but they're a little easier and they don't have the best player in the league on their team, right? So you'd rather play them. And I'll say this, I think it's possible that the Dream's shooting volume and ability like helps them and makes this potentially a series that they could play well in. But that's also, in theory, something that opens up more variance in a way that could help. So if I'm the Fever, I wanted to play the Dream. And if I'm the Fever, I wanted to be the 6th seed just so there's a small chance they'd have home court in the second round. They had a perfect last night of the season, I think.
Right. And so looking back, usually what you do in these matchups is you say, okay, let's go back and look at how the regular season went. You hinted at it earlier. They played 4 times before their last game was on July 11th. And so Caitlin Clark played in 3 of those 4 games. So you can't really look at the film from those games, at least definitely not from a Fever like offensive perspective, and say, okay, here's what we're going to try to replicate, or here's what we need to do better. So it's very odd. It was 2-2. That matchup was evenly split between the 2 teams, but it'll be like basically watching these 2 teams play for the first time all season when this game tips off on Sunday.
Yeah, and like Naz Hillman went to the starting 5 for Atlanta after that game. For a while, Greiner was starting and she got moved to the bench, and like that also has changed the Dream's identity and part of why they were able to close so well. And so that's a new look. Like, yeah, you'll rely on that film a little bit to see what like a team runs or like what matchups didn't work, but you kind of shrug, right? That's pre-All-Star break. There's a lot of nothing you can really take from those in terms of specifics. And so, yeah, it's going to be tough and kind of a fresh slate, which I think both teams will say is an advantage, right? Oh, they've never seen us like this, right? So that kind of comes out in the wash. But yeah, they're tough, man. They're really good. Their top 8 is fantastic, and the shooting is just so frightening. The players that they have shoot is just it's insane. 10 threes a game for a player in the W is just nuts. Ryan Howard is so good.
We were talking about just how we assess Stephanie White and kind of the team she was trying to coach this year. Well, you talk about a team that was so deliberate this offseason in building an identity, and it's the Atlanta dream, right?
Yes.
They picked Tahina Pau, who I loved watching her at South Carolina and even going back to Oregon. I wasn't quite sure if she'd be a real rotation WNBA player, and she proved me wrong literally immediately. They started her off the bat when Jordan came injured, and she still stayed in the rotation even once Canada came back. And she shot, I believe, 39% from three this year as a rookie, coming straight off of a college season. That was insane to me. But just in general, for those of you who aren't aware, with Carl Smesco, he came over, was the coach for over 2 decades at Florida Gulf Coast, where he pretty much turned that into a consistent threat to make the NCAA tournament and win games at the college basketball level. And he's very analytics based, inside, outside. They like to either get a layup or a three, right? That kind of, making an NBA comparison, very, very Joe Mazzulla like, right? It's like, don't take 18-foot shots, please. Just get to the rim or fire up a three. Just how do you think this iteration of the Fever team can try to guard a team like that?
Yeah, it's tough, right? Because you have to try to cut off those zones, but they know you're going to do that, right? And they move the ball pretty well. And like even Bree Jones is taking it out a little bit. She doesn't shoot that much, but like I bet Stephanie White's like, Bree Jones is shooting a 3 a game. Like I never thought that would happen coaching her, Griner's taking like a 3 every other game. They're really intentional about that. And like, that's again, to go back to Stephanie White for a second, like that's what you would hope is if they were healthy enough this season, the Fever, you'd walk away knowing so much about what their style was supposed to be and look like. And it's obvious what Carl Smesco wants to do. If he wins coach of the year, I think that's deserved. If Nasake wins, that's also deserved. But they're both awesome. So yeah, that's going to be the tough challenges for the Fevers. They both do that. They're very analytically sound. Howard can create her own shot and drill it from anywhere. Gray's obviously amazing. Their post players are bruising and huge. That's the thing Stephanie White talked about with the challenges today is the size of the dream positionally. Like they have 2 routinely, bigs on the floor that can play inside out, which is tough to deal with. And their guards are mostly bigger for their position. Like that, the size advantage is so natural, and that gives them easier passing lanes, gives them advantages on shots that might be difficult for some others. So cutting them off is only half the battle. Like you really got to stick to your principles and be disciplined in rotations, or the Dream are just going to get shots they like all night, every game.
Right. And the thing about what makes them so scary as a team and an offense is they've got, I would say, 6 players who can get you 18 points, and you wouldn't be surprised, right? You go Howard Jones, Jordan Canada, of course, Brittany Griner, and Naz Hillman, right? That's a whole starting 5 plus 1 of players who you're like, man, if they go off, it could be over. If multiple of these players go off, it could be over, right? And you look at Brittany Griner, very efficient still this season. This is the first year she finished at 9.8 points a game. First year of her career, she's not averaging 10. And I don't think she's, upset at that, right? She seems to be comfortable in this kind of coasting role where it's like, okay, if we really need a bucket, I'm still, Brittany Griner, I'm still 6'8", and I can still just get the ball somewhere in the middle of the post and try to create that for us. But it's not a scenario where it's been her whole career in Phoenix where everything is run through her. And so when you're playing a team this balanced, it makes it so hard to game plan around them because you really don't know what could be coming on any given night.
And oh, by the way, they lead the league in rebounding because of their size that we already talked about, our ice positions. And they lead the league, and their opponents have the fewest assists per game. They're very disruptive and physical in their style. And so if you're having like a slightly arrhythmic night as a team, you're going to have a tough time, right? Because you're going to get less chances than your opponent, and they're going to be hard. So you got to, again, this is the word Stephanie White used, and this always is a buzzword, but in this case, it actually like applies more than normal. She said discipline. Like if the Fever break from their game plan or try to freelance, or someone tries to be a hero because something's not working, they're going to get toast quick because the Dream style lends them to more chances, more efficient chances, and they have players who can convert them. So I think it's going to be really tough without, being able to find a way to get good first shots. And if the Fever have a lot of turnovers, they are toast because they're going to lose the rebounding battle probably in all these games.
Right. You mentioned Atlanta's defense. They finished with both the second best offensive and defensive ratings in the W this year. So really on both sides of the ball, they were incredible. Of course, Minnesota kind of led both of the charge on both sides as well. With that, and we'll get into kind of some full predictions here in a minute, but just what do you think this team could maybe learn, specifically the players who were here, Kelsey, Aaliyah, Lexi Hull, from the way that they really weren't super competitive against Connecticut last year in that playoff series, in their first playoff series? What do you think those players can maybe learn going into this year, getting back in the playoffs?
Yeah, they got wrecked in that first game. The second game was at least closer when they started Temi and all that, but they still lost, right? One of it is just like what does rise, like what physicality rises, what mental focus, the rises there and all that. Like, it's different. They'll have a home game this year, so they'll have a little more wiggle room of comfortability at some point. But that's a big ramp up, and like, look, it might apply to more than them. Like, obviously, they're the big ones. They played every game this year, and they've been with the Fever for their whole careers. Like, nobody with the Fever in the playoffs before, right? Like, it had been 8 years before they played a playoff game last year, right? So everybody learned something about the focus level, the film and changes, the other teams locking into your game plan. How much does that change things, right? They played against Stephanie White last year. White has a lot of playoff experience. Christy Sides had none. So that's obviously a big change in how they'll be prepped by a coach. But, that's like the intangible stuff is what you learn first. And then obviously also how important the game planning is, how dialed in you have to be, how the mentality is. We talked to Lexi Hall about that at practice on Wednesday. And, Natasha Howard's been in the playoffs 11 of 12 years of her career, multi-time champ. Like, she knows more than anybody about that rising intensity, what it takes to get over the hump. She's played with some of the best in the world on many different teams. Like, I think she's going to be an important leader for this group as well, trying to keep them on track in a series like this. But more than anything, it's going to be fascinating to see what a home Fever playoff game looks like, because the last time they had one, Stephanie White was the coach in 2016. So I think that will also be a big shift for everybody, is what does that feel like? How much easier are things there? Can they parlay that into any wins?
Right. It's changed from that 2-1 format to the 1-1-1. So game 1 will be Sunday at 3 in Atlanta. Game 2 will be back in Indy. 3, if there is a game 3, will be back in Atlanta. So that's a good point. And I love the point you brought in, right? Obviously, they thought this team would be a lot different as we've gone over, but they hired Stephanie White. They signed Natasha Howard. They signed DeWanna Bonner. Obviously, that went the way it went. But they made moves over the offseason for this reason, right? Because they know those are champions, right, in their own right. Stephanie White, not a champ. Stephanie White wasn't a champion as an assistant with the Fever, but she took them to the last game of the finals in 2015 when they lost at Minnesota. So these are people who have been through this, been in deep playoff runs. And so, and obviously, this team looking the way it was supposed to look, but it'll definitely change the way, probably the composure of the team, where it just felt like you mentioned, that first game in Connecticut last year. Once it was done, right? Once Connecticut took a hold of that game, the Fever really showed no fight back in that one. And I don't expect to see that in this series. So
Great.
That's definitely a lot different. I just want to get right into it. What is your prediction going into this series, Tony?
Yeah, I think the introduction of variance, because of the volume of, I said this earlier, threes that the Dream take, and the fact that there's no great defensive option on Atlanta for Kelsey Mitchell. They have good defensive players on their team. Obviously, you already cited that they were second in defense, but like no one can guard Kelsey Mitchell straight up, but like really disrupt her for 40 minutes. I think the Fever certainly can win a game in the series. They beat them twice this season. As you said, they played once without Caitlin already. They've like done this a little bit. Aaliyah's going to have the toughest time being herself of their best players, I think. She's going to be dealing with a lot of size, and so using her in the ways we described earlier, I think is really going to limit the Fever's like creativity they can have if she's really slowed down. And as you know from watching in the last 2 years, one of the players that's given Aaliyah the most trouble is Bree Jones. Bree Jones has been one of her like kryptonite players since entering the league, right? And that's Atlanta's obviously Swiss Army knife center. So I think Atlanta is better. There's a reason they won more games. I think Atlanta should be the favorite. I also think the Fever can win games in this series, and they've shown with their 2 All-Stars available, they can beat almost anybody. So I'm going to go 2-1 Dream, but 2-0 Dream is also possible. But there is enough variance in this that the Fever actually, they can win the series. I say actually, and that sounds harsh. Like, they can do it. The odds are not like super low like they might have been last year, but it's going to be tough, and they're going to have to be ready, I think, for the physicality, because if they get out physical and outshot profiled, they're going to be in a lot of trouble.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. I'm going to go with Dream in 2 games. I think it is a 2-0 series. I think both games could be close. In 2-0, I suspect a low scoring affair in these games, no matter how many games it goes to. And I'm with you where I do think the Fever can win this series. I just, because of what you said with Aaliyah Boston, I was going to get to that. I just can't see, if she can't, play to the way she can play, right, to her potential. But if she's limited by Bree Jones and even Brittany Griner, I just don't know if this team will be able to put up enough points against a team like Atlanta. And of course, that variance point is a good point. We see it so much in the NBA where it leads to teams maybe losing 1 or 2 extra games in a series. But those are all 7-game series where you have a 3-game series. This is almost just like college basketball where you never know, right? Which is the way things often go in the NCAA tournaments for college basketball. So I think it could be a close series. I think there will be close games, no matter how many games it is, and no matter who wins. But I am leaning Dream in 2 games here.
Now, the other thing that I probably should have said is, look, Smezko did great. It's his first playoffs, right? Different experience, different everything. These are the biggest games he's had. Coaching in the pros, like how different is his prep? How different did the Dream look, if any, in these games will be very telling. I don't think it's going to be like, oh my gosh, they look horrible and totally different. Like they have a style and identity that works. And Gray's the best player, I think, in the series that based on the regular season. Boston's right there. But how this goes and how he looks could also be somewhat of a factor. We'll see.
That's a good point. And I think it helps him that although he's a young coach or not a young coach necessarily, but a new coach, it helps that he doesn't have something like young team that hasn't been through it, right? It's not like you mentioned with Christy Sides last year. It's not that sort of situation. Of course, Brittany Griner's a champion. Bree Jones, we just talked about it, went through all those battles in Connecticut. Players like that have been through it. Even Alicia Gray, going back to Dallas, has been in playoff series. So it's not necessarily a super young team, but I think this series – of the 4 first-round series, I don't know if you agree or not, and we're going to do a full playoff predictions here, but I don't know if you agree. I think this is the most intriguing of the 4.
That's a good question. Yeah.
There's one other one, that the New York Phoenix series.
Yeah, New York Phoenix is really
right up there.
Because New York's finally healthy. They finally had their whole team for the last game. And that's the only reason I would give them a puncher's chance. Like they looked miserable the last half of the season, but they were really banged up. I think the top seed's the favorite in every series. People are really interested in Aces Storm, but like, man, the Aces just seem like a machine right now. I don't know. The Storm have beaten everybody. But yeah, I think that the Lynx are heavy favorites. The Aces are pretty heavy favorites. And then the Dream and Phoenix are most likely to lose a game, but I think the home team's the favorite in every series.
Here we go. Let's just get into prediction. Start here with the 4 first-round series. We talked about, Minnesota, Golden State. Great season, Golden State. Like, honestly, so admirable how good they have been as an expansion team. But, like, I don't really see a world where this Minnesota team that is so hungry after the way last season ended at the very end, game 5 of the finals. I don't really see them even dropping a game in this series. So I'm going to go with Minnesota in 2 there. I'm picking the upset in the other side of that bracket. I think New York does beat Phoenix in 3 games.
Wow.
I think they go in. I think they go into Phoenix game 3 and win that game. Here's the thing. I know she hasn't been in this top 3 discussion that we've talked about this year, but Stewie is still Stewie, right? And she can absolutely, in a game 3 situation, be the best player on that court. And by the way, so can Jonquel Jones, right? It's not like it's just her, right? So I think there's a scenario where they go in there and kind of flex their muscle, flex their experience from being in the finals the last 2 years and win that one. Vegas, Seattle, I'm with you. Seattle disappoints me so much because I like, on an individual level, so many players on that team, but just Noel Quinn and the whole system, they haven't been able to figure it out. And I don't think they even steal a game from Vegas with as well. The Aces are. So I'll go Aces there. And then I already shared that I think the Dream beat the Fever in 2.
Okay. So yeah, Golden State, great job this year. Veronica Burton, where did this come from? You were unprotecting the expansion draft, and like you have a real case for all W. Yeah, you're not beating the Lynx. Sorry, you're just not. As the last game of the regular season showed, the Lynx have a higher level, let's say, than Golden State. If he has an MVP case, they're loaded. No discussion needed. It's interesting. New York could totally win. Like they started 11-0. Their peak level is clearly super high. They have 2 MVPs from this decade, like since the 2020 started on their team. They've just lost something, man. Like even when they had most of their healthy players, their rebounding's been worse. Their defense isn't as connected. Like they're just some games I watch them and it feels like they're just burping up threes because they want to do that. Like that's fine. Threes are good. You have good shooters, but something's been missing for them for a while, and I think they can get it back. They won the championship last year, for Pete's sake, with a largely similar team minus Benigni Hamilton. But I think Phoenix is just better, and AT's been better than Stewie this year, I think, when they were both healthy. And so it might be down to the non-stars or the lesser stars. That's such a harsh way to describe those players. They're all really good. But like if Zably has a great series, like Phoenix could look awesome. I'm going to take Phoenix, but I get why that one could go either way. Yeah, we've already done Dream Fever. I tweeted this, by the way, when the Fever and Aces were playing and the Aces were like 12-11 and the Fever won. And I was like, man, Asia on this crummy team I watch her and I still just feel like this is the best player. Like I just do. And so the poor Storm, NECA, I don't have a vote this year. I had an official vote the last 4 years. I voted her first team LW every year. It was like me and one other voter every year. I think she's awesome. Skylar Diggins is very good. The Aces are better. So I'm taking the home team in every series, which is very boring.
Right. And maybe that's just why I felt like picking New York, right? Maybe that's just like not because I went into it thinking that way, but maybe in the back of my head, I was just like, I can't give every home team the win. So I do think New York wins that series, but
higher seed, I think. Like by a lot.
Right, exactly. So yeah, moving on to my second round. My second round will be Lynx versus Liberty and Aces versus Dream. And now this goes to, for those who aren't aware, it's a best of 3, best of 5 to best of 7 now in these series. The finals will finally be a best of 7. And in this second round in the Lynx Liberty series, I do think the Lynx get the revenge from last year's finals. I say they win that one in 4 games. Once again, Fee's just playing so well, and that entire team is just so connected. By the way, going back to that 2022 season, the Fever had Atlanta Smith on the roster for what, a handful of games, and they let her go back then. And right, and when they did let her go, it's not like we were sitting there like, why would they do that, right? It just seemed like
you're the only other person that can say this. Everyone always is like, they're so dumb for letting Alana Smith go. It's like, dude, when that happened, everybody was like, yep, they makes sense. Like they kept her
nobody sat there and questioned
her. Yeah,
right.
Made perfect sense at the time.
No, it's a great development story. You know, one of the best development stories, not just in the W to me, in all of sports over the last few years that I've seen. Right? 5, I think it could be one of those 5-game series where game 5 ends up being a 15-point blowout. But I think they can push them to 5. But I still pick the Aces as the 1 and 2 seeds advancing to the finals.
Yeah, Joel. First of all, we glossed over Joel Lloyd playing against the Storm. So that's fun. As we both picked Aces in that series. Yeah, so my Phoenix in the second round, but I just think Minnesota's better than everybody, right? And so good luck to you, but I don't think that's a good matchup for them. Good luck, Garden Fee. And they don't, the guards on Minnesota will be key in that series, but they always have somebody who can get in the paint and make that defense move. I'd take Minnesota in 4 there. Yeah, the Dream can beat the Aces, man. They have the same record. The Dream are really good. They have the size. They have players to throw at Asia to make life hard. They have the shooting to actually keep up with what is normally a high-powered Aces offense. But I've seen the Aces do it, and I've never seen the Dream do it, and that tiebreaker very rarely lets me down. So I will join you on the boring answer of a 1 versus 2 finals, which is crazy because the Aces were 14-14 in August last month. But I'm putting them in the finals against Minnesota.
Right. And I guess you could say the Aces are on like a Pacers type of run right now, right? Where at the beginning of the season, nobody was looking at them. It was like, okay, they were great. Obviously, the Aces have been great for multiple seasons now, but they were great last year. And then it looked like it had trailed off before getting back on the track. So yeah, the Aces and the Lynx are my finals. And I don't feel great about it. I don't, but I'm picking the Aces to win this in 6.
Wow.
And what I will say, if it goes to 7, Minnesota to me will win this series. Like I talked about earlier, Stephanie White being the coach in 2015 when that went to game 5 in Minnesota, and that was a blowout. The Lynx, just that crowd, the energy, they just blew out the Fever almost from the start of that game 10 years ago. And you look back to the game, the game 3 when Maya Moore hit the game winner in Indy, where that was the game, right? If the Fever were going to win that series 10 years ago, that was the game. I think something very similar could happen in this final series if it is in these 2 teams where the Aces are going to do it. You're going to have to close that at home because I just do not think you are going into Minneapolis in a do or die game and defeating the Lynx in that game. So that's the way I see it. I just think, once again, you said it. A'ja Wilson to me is just so far and away the best player. And when I say far and away, I'm not saying that Fee or Alyssa Thomas aren't in the same stratosphere, but it is clear, right? Once you get between the lines, just about every time she looks like the best player on the court. And once again, Lloyd is going to be the X factor in these series. Jewel Lloyd is going to have to show up and play a lot better than we saw her play at the beginning of this year. But she's done it before, right? She's won a championship before in Seattle. Of course, this Aces team has won a pair of championships before. And so I think they win their 3rd in 4 years.
That is very possible. Minnesota just trips me up a little bit at their highest level because they closed the season so blah. Like it was, they were resting players all the time and stuff, but it's so many listless performances, and it's so hard to they had nothing to play for, right? Who cares? Am I really really overthinking this? But it's like, man, I wanted they and then they kicked Golden State's butt with an awesome fourth quarter, and I was like, okay, maybe I'm back in, but I just can't get the taste out of my mouth. There reminds me a little bit of Denver a couple years ago when they lost in the second round to Minnesota. Like they closed that year kind of blonde. Everybody's like, whatever. They won the championship. They don't need the Malays. They don't care about these late season games. It's like, hey, they kind of lost their peak level in a game 7 and lost. But I do think Minnesota is the best team in the league. I think fee per minute was the best player this year, but Asia's total package and general dominance makes her a very worthy MVP. So I think that will be a very close and awesome series. The teams that have played New York the last 2 finals finally playing each other. I'm going to slightly tip Minnesota in 7, but that's a tough, potentially toss-up level series. And the Aces could, I think, by the way, get to that series in the longest win streak in W history, depending on how their first couple rounds go. So that'll be very fun to see how their playoff run goes.
Yeah, okay, if they did do that, would you pick against them in the finals? If they go 5-0 here in these first 2 series, would you feel confident in yourself to pick against them to win the next series?
Yeah, if they go 2-0, 3-0, and they've then at that point won 21 in a row, I might have to pick them over Minnesota, yes.
Golly. So, yeah, I think it'll be fun. I hope that that's the finals. No disrespect to any of these other teams. They're all good teams. But I think as far as just enjoyment value and competitiveness in the finals, that will be the best scenario if those 2 teams face off. So I do hope it is indeed Aces Lynx. Well, Tony, thank you so much for joining me, man. This is fun.
It was fun. I like the name of this podcast a lot, and I like talking with you. So this was a good time.
There we go. No, I love it too. That's why when me and Scott were talking about bringing it back, I was like, we can add some Fever stuff in here, right? We don't have to change the name or anything. The name still fits. And so I was like, let's do it. And so we were on the same page there. He was like,
great
hey,
logo,
I'll leave the Fever stuff to you. Exactly, right? So I love it. Thanks for joining again. And once again, this is the Right Up Meridian podcast on the Back Home Network. There are so many things going on right now in the Back Home Network. Me and Tony are recording this. The IU football game just began on Friday night here at a weird 6:30 p.m. start time against Indiana State. So by the time you're hearing this, there might be a new Crimson Cast episode recapping that game. I'm not sure if they're planning to record on a Saturday or on their usual kind of Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon slot there. But go ahead, check that out with Galen and Scott when you can. Of course, there's the Big Red Carpet, the new show by Rhett Lewis as well, going really in-depth on Indiana football. Galen's also involved in football weather, just a general national football show. So a lot good going here on the Back Home Network. Again, this has been the Right Up Meridian podcast. Thank you so much for listening.